On this episode of Forge and Anvil, Donald Trump managed to fundraise $7 million after the release of his mugshot from Fulton County. This comes to pass while efforts are being made to use the 14th Amendment to have the former president removed from the ballot altogether. We'll discuss what may happen as the election season continues. Next, Trump was not the only one to see some serious cash as both Desantis and Vivek Ramaswamy announced that they raised more than 1 million in 24 hours following the RNC debate. Finally, we'll discuss how popular commentator and former California gubernatorial candidate Larry Elder was kept from joining the RNC debate despite meeting their requirements. All this and more, so stick around. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. My name is Connor. I am host of the Forge and Anvil podcast. As you've probably noticed, those of you who follow the show regularly, my co-host Michael Aper is not with us. Unfortunately, he messaged me a few minutes before we got started and let me know that he was very, very sick. So prayers for him, and hopefully he will get back on his feet really quickly. But I am joined tonight by Chris. So, Chris, I'll go ahead and just have you introduce yourself, man of Bert, to the audience.
Thank you. I'm Chris Bertman. I'm a writer for Timcast. I like to yell at people on Twitter. Well, excuse me, X, I guess. I don't know what to call it anymore. I'll just go with X.
There we are.
Yeah, I'm a journalist for Timcast.
Perfect. Well, welcome aboard. We appreciate you being here. And if you guys are listening to this playback on Spotify or a Google Podcast, be sure to join us sometime for a Monday night live stream on Rumble or YouTube where you can send in your chats. If you happen to be seeing this on Twitter, feel free to jump over to either of those platforms if you want to send in questions to the chat for us to answer. But either way, we will get rolling on with our night. Michael usually takes a watchful eye over Rumble, so I'll do my best to make sure to not miss any of your chats over there. But bear with me. I'm flying solo, but we'll go straight into our evening here. I actually wanted to start, Chris, by just having you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got started with writing altogether.
So it's funny that I'm reading and writing for a living right now because I basically flunked out of all my English classes back in high school. I almost didn't graduate if it wasn't for my mom, telling me to get on my ass and get my credit retrieval stuff taken care of. But anyway, back then I even in college, I had some professors that, you'd write some papers and they'd praise you for your good work. And I have a couple professors saying, like, have you ever thought about getting into journalism? And I just kind of passively thought about it, never really was anything that interested me too much. But I knew I wanted to do something with writing. And by the time I got into university, I started getting into a little bit of like creative writing, writing narratives, some poetry. And I got really jaded by the whole atmosphere out there just because we were talking about before the show, I'm from California, born and raised. And the classroom itself, you weren't allowed to write anything lest it be deemed offensive. And so I had some people in one of my classes, they're critiquing some of the stuff you wrote. And instead of critiquing how you wrote it, they're critiquing what you wrote. And just it sat wrong with me. And I kind of I wanted to walk away from the whole, career path that I was debating on. And anyway, I finished up college. I started working a blue collar job for probably 8 years between two different companies. And, one day I was just kind of getting fed up and I was watching all the stuff that was going down with politics. And, by that time COVID started. And I don't know, I was basically doing journalism on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, unprofessionally. Like I didn't realize what I was doing was journalism, but I was basically finding things, explaining what was going on. And I didn't really have a following back then. I was just doing it. Usually ended up getting into arguments with people on Facebook or, what have you. Yeah, exactly. It was fun. It was great. And I had a friend who I went to high school with. Shout out to Anel Chavez. She recommended that, why don't you try getting a job with one of these outlets, doing just something, some kind of side work.
Hmm.
So I kind of molded around and I figured, what's the worst that happens is they say no, right?
Right.
So I submitted, wasn't like a resume. I forget what they had me do for the Daily Caller. And I didn't think I was going to hear back. And, maybe a week or so later, I'm hearing back from they're interested. They wanted me to do their contributor program. So it worked out. I ended up writing for them for probably 8-9 months or so, close to a year, not quite a year.
Awesome.
And it was just like, it was great because I was finally on the inside and I could kind of see how narratives get spun and see how a lot of outlets regurgitate the same information that another outlet regurgitated. But, the biggest thing was like finding what the actual source was and trying to get to the actual nut of what the story is. And I'd see a lot of these outlets, legacy outlets, just completely spinning things. You look at the facts and you look at what's actually written, and it's like that doesn't add up because the facts say one thing, but your opinion, which you're not listing as opinion, is saying something else.
Right.
Anyway, I was still working a blue collar job at that time, and I was writing for them on the side. And I got into an accident at my job. I was out of work for about a month or so, and I think the second week I was out, I was just casually on Twitter, and I saw Cassandra McDonald. She was saying, "Hey, we're looking for writers for Timcast." Again, I didn't think anything was going to happen, but I was like, "Whatever, I'll throw my line out." I sent out my Daily Caller link. I just said, "Hey, I'm available." That was it. Walked away. I didn't think anything was going to happen, and I'm within a minute or two, I was getting a DM from her saying like, "Hey, can you send me some more of your information?" And I was just like, "You got to be kidding, man! It was that easy?" Because I knew like if I could get in and get some kind of an interview, I was confident. Like, okay, yeah, I'm confident they'll like what I can do and they'll want to work with me. My thing was just getting the interview, and I didn't think it was going to be that easy, but it was that easy. And so they flew me out. I talked with some of the other writers, and I was still in California at the time. And 3 months later, we bought a house. We moved across the country, and now we're in West Virginia, and I'm working for Timcast. I'm coming up on about a year in September.
Awesome. Is that full time then?
Yeah.
Awesome. And when you were at the Daily Caller, was that full time as well?
No, that was very part time. There was,
Gotcha.
some months I would do 40 articles. Other months I'd do 2 articles. It really kind of just depended if the work schedule I had at the moment doing my day job, if I had the free time or not to actually write.
Gotcha. So when it comes to finding sources, you mentioned, that you kind of discovered uh, what that was all about. So as someone who is just getting into journalism, what kind of things did you do to actually go about getting the sources? Because I started doing some writing myself very recently for just a small local outlet, and they've been great. We've had a lot of fun doing that together. And for me, getting out and actually getting to be able to be somewhere in person to actually get a source from the ground, as opposed to writing more about more like amplifying a different story that's already happening elsewhere. How do you typically go about solving that problem when you were part-time?
So I forget who I was talking with over on X the other day about it, but it was something that we all find frustrating as writers. When you have outlets that publish articles and you see the little hyperlink and you go to click on the hyperlink, and sometimes it'll take you to that outlet's list of other articles about that person.
Right.
Okay. That's something that frustrates us because, it's one thing if it's just a general term that you're just looking up. But if you're talking about a specific court case that happened or a specific press release or something, and you've got the hyperlink there, and I go to click it, and it leads me to something that has nothing to do with what you're actually talking about. That frustrates me because you're just trying to get clicks on your website.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I know I do is if I hyperlink something, I'm either hyperlinking to the exact thing I'm talking about or referencing, or I'm hyperlinking to one of our past articles that was basically expanding on what I'm writing about in the moment.
Right. Right. So when it comes to actually being like on the ground, then when you were being paid part time, like did you ever get a chance to actually go and find a news story directly from the source? Like how did you go about, I guess, sort of funding yourself when you were so part time and at the beginning of your journalism?
Okay, so yeah, I wasn't actually going on the ground when I was with Daily Caller. There was all online. Um,
Gotcha.
I'm still, even with Timcast, I'm not an on the ground reporter. There's been a
Right.
couple things that I've gone and reported on in person. Um, in town. I think there was something I just recently did with a Laud. He's our on the ground guy out in Maryland. But yeah, as far as that goes, it's kind of just word of mouth. Sometimes people that I work with, people that I'm friendly with that work in the same industry, it's, hey, this thing's happening. Are you interested? Or, oh, I heard this is going to happen on X date, So it's, you go based off leads.
Gotcha. So you mentioned earlier when you first got into writing that you got really jaded because of the way people sort of attacked what you're writing as opposed to how your writing actually reads and the actual content. They were more frustrated about what you were choosing to write about. Um, I'm curious because right now you kind of mentioned, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you kind of woke up a little bit politically during 2020, as many people did, myself included. I would say I wasn't following politics. I would say I had a lot of the principles that I hold politically still to this day, but was completely unaware of the weekly news cycle. But a lot of people that I find during this season have really woke up spiritually as well. And I'm curious, since you talked about having that sort of frustration where people were being sort of legalistic about what you're choosing to write about as opposed to what your actual writing content looked like. Um, I mean, do you have you had any form of spiritual awakening along with a political awakening, first of all, and second of all, as it translates to your writing? Um, a lot of people that are in that writing space really felt stifled. A lot of people who grew up in maybe like a Christian or Catholic household felt stifled in their artistic abilities growing up, and a lot of people are beginning to find freedom now, as it seems a lot of the more conservative theological individuals are starting to embrace the arts properly now, in a way that they had sort of abandoned them for several decades. So, if you can maybe just talk a little bit more on that.
So I had probably two awakenings,
Okay.
um, maybe three, I guess, to be fair. Two political and one spiritual. First political one happened around 2014, 2015. That's when a lot of the race politics stuff started going mainstream. You had MTV Decoded with Francesca Ramsey. You had like uh, what that show, I don't know if we're allowed to curse, S, white people say.
Mm,
Um, and I just remember sitting back and I was never the type of liberal or Democrat that was like going to go to a protest and hold a sign. But, for sure, I was like, whatever the narrative was, yeah, it makes sense to me.
mm,
And when I saw the race stuff going mainstream, I remember sitting back and kind of just feeling dumbfounded where I was like, wait a minute, I thought we didn't like this stuff. I thought we weren't supposed to be talking like this. And, I got into an argument with somebody who I won't say we were friends, but we were friendly. And man, that just sent me down a rabbit hole. I started
mm,
questioning everything that I was taught, everything that I thought I knew about politics or anything. I started going out of my way to look up sources and just personalities and people that I disagreed with and that I just hated, right? Because I was told to.
right.
And I was trying to objectively watch things and say, okay, what are they saying? What part am I actually disagreeing with and why? And I found out that a lot of these people, one, are they're not bad people. The people that I was told to hate, they're not bad people, and they made a lot of sense. Even if I disagreed with what they were saying, I could understand how they got from point A to point B, and I could at
Mm.
least respect them. So, I got sent down this libertarian rabbit hole for what, 5, 6 years until about 2019, 2020, excuse me. And that's when I think the second one happened. I knew I wasn't a liberal. I knew I wasn't a Democrat at that point, but I wasn't public about it. I was
Mm.
almost ashamed to say that, like, hey, I don't agree with the mainstream narrative.
Mm.
I mean, I would tell people in private, but like, if you asked me to post something online or, um, just be candid about it, like, yeah, I typically shied away from it. But then
Mm.
COVID happened, and my God, the people that I thought were reasonable, I thought were my friends, they just completely lost their minds. And so that's where the second political awakening and the spiritual awakening happened.
Mm.
Second political awakening happened where I started to realize, I think a lot of the things that I accepted as like I could disagree with, but like, accept that somebody else might believe, I started to think like, okay, no, I think they're just wrong.
Mm.
I'm at this point, like, I don't think I have as much respect for somebody who is going to think certain things. And I started to realize, oh, I think I am a conservative at that point. You
Mm.
know, um, the spiritual awakening. I was raised Catholic Christian by my
Mm.
mom. My mom and dad never got along with the religion stuff. My dad was, you know, Jewish, but never practiced. So I grew up being told by my mom, "You're Catholic," and my dad like, "No, he's Jewish." And I'm sitting there, I'm 5. I don't know what to think. And so I never did catechism. I did the classes, but we never did the confirmation.
Gotcha.
Um, right around the time my grandma passed away when I was 10 years old, we started transitioning over to a Christian church, and I went there for maybe another 2 or 3 years, and then I strayed for, well, up until about 2020. And the thing that I'm still at this point, I haven't gone to church. I I haven't decided, I'm Christian. I haven't decided I'm Jewish. I haven't pinpointed what I want to study, what I want for myself. But it was watching my fellow man worship man, whether it was
Hmm.
Fauci, whether it was George Floyd, whether it was at this point Zelensky. It was watching that and getting really creeped out by it. You know, um, I think at that point, I don't know. I started to question, like, you know what? Maybe all the religion stuff my mom was telling me about, maybe she was right. Because if man is not the answer, like, it has to be something else. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Huh.
I'm kind of at a standstill right now.
Okay.
I know I believe. I know I believe for sure.
Gotcha. So would you say right now that you would consider yourself to be like agnostic? Do you consider yourself to be Catholic? Do you consider yourself to be like a certain denomination of Christian?
I don't know. Agnostic seems, it doesn't seem right for me because
Mm.
for sure I believe that there is a God.
Gotcha.
2020 opened my eyes. Um, I don't know. I really don't, because I've been invited by people to go to certain places, and I think this is the one of the frustrating things is, like, anybody who is very openly religious, I don't shame them for it. Like, I'm not trying to give them a hard time, but it is a little frustrating because I'll start to say, like, well, my dad's side of the family is Jewish, and I kind of want to explore that, or maybe this is interesting to me. Somebody will say, well, oh, come to my church, we study the right thing, and I'm thinking, like, okay, but now you're pushing me away.
Mm.
This isn't, you're not making me feel comfortable with what I'm already feel like. You've already convinced me. You don't have
Mm.
to keep pulling me in one direction. Like, let me figure this out for myself.
Right. Yeah, it's important to explore it for yourself. That's for sure. I mean, for me, like I grew up in a a Christian church, but for myself, I realized somewhere along the way that I had a lot of holes in my theology, and I started exploring it for myself. And the Dunning-Kruger effect, I really think that that's a real thing when it comes to even just religion and theology. Because there really is a point where if you grow up in a church or you grow up not believing, I think it's really easy to have this arrogance where you either think you know everything about about what it is to follow God, or everything about just life in general, whatever the case may be. Then you reach a point where you realize you don't know a lot. And I think that's where a lot of Christians actually deconstruct. I think once they're sort of in the bottom of the slope of the Dunning-Kruger effect. um, and a lot of them don't recover from that. But if you kind of push through it, and like that's where I would describe myself now, I'm sort of on the uphill slope after that valley, where I'm starting to better understand my faith that I actually grew up with, but I've been making it my own so much more over the last couple of years. And 2020 really solidified that, because similarly to you, um I was raised with this system of belief that I understood that um, mankind is going to worship something, and that's just unavoidable. There's a God-shaped hole in every man's heart, and if God's not in it, it's going to be filled with something else. But ultimately, I did not know what. I should say I didn't have a massive exposure to individuals, to so many individuals, I should say, being so zealous for something that was just another human's idea, or another individual themselves, whether that be Fauci, or whether that be the science, things like that. And once I saw these people really throwing themselves into this sort of pseudo religion that came about in 2020, with basically everything that was considered the mainstream narrative, it really made me dive much deeper into uh, my roots. And now I feel so much more grounded. And it's so interesting how that can happen just by seeing the craziness that starts to unfold in this world. It's like you get to a point where you realize, like, there's a fork in the road, and you kind of have to pick which lane you're going to go into. So yeah, I mean, it's encouraging to hear that you're exploring, because yeah, I mean, ultimately we're a Christian podcast, and we have a lot of Christian believers, but not everyone that we have on the show is of a Christian background. We have, we believe in bringing about people who are informed, as well as entertaining for our guests. And we'll definitely be praying for you that you can continue on your journey. And of course, my bias is that I hope it leads you to Christ, and that you come to find your salvation in Him alone. But obviously, I'm not going to push you towards it, as you said, other than encourage you that keep exploring. And if you ever want resources, I'll definitely share them with you, but won't thrust them on you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you, being transparent and telling a little bit about yourself. I want to go ahead and get into our news stories. And those of you who are watching, if you're wondering why the format's a little bit different, like I said, if you're coming in just now, Michael is sick, unfortunately, so I am flying solo. Don't have my normal co-host with me, and then Chris is joining in, and Gavin Wax actually was planning on joining us, and he said that he had something come up and he's going to be late, so he may still join us before the show is over. We'll see. But either way, I wanted to take the opportunity to let you guys get to know Chris a little bit more, so that the rest of our evening can be all the more special now that we know a little bit more about his background. So let's go ahead and dive into our first story. Hidden Angels, how are you? I see you there on Rumble. Appreciate you coming in. She said, Chris, pray about it and he will tell you. Amen.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get into this. This is from the Post Millennial. Oh, didn't have it at the top of the screen here. That's my bad, folks. So the Post Millennial. So this is America contributes $7 million to Trump's campaign after his mugshot. As of Saturday evening, former President Donald Trump had raised $7.1 million since he was booked into the Fulton County Jail in Atlanta, Georgia, Thursday on racketeering charges for allegedly attempting to overturn the 2020 Georgia presidential election. According to Political, The former president's campaign broke a 24-hour fundraising record with his campaign on Friday after it brought in 4.18 million selling merchandise with Trump's mugshot on it with the slogan "Never Surrender" and blasting out campaign emails. Journalist Miranda Devine posted on X a screenshot of one of the emails that read, "It's not enough for the ruling party to arrest its leading opponent as an innocent man and force me to take a mugshot despite being one of the most recognizable people in the world." The email noted that President Joe Biden is gleefully raising money off the arrests. President Biden made a post on X asking for donations at the exact same time that former President Trump scheduled to turn himself in. The post read apropos, excuse me, of nothing. "I think today a great day to give to my campaign." Wow, I can't speak tonight, folks. Bear with me. Upon release of the mugshot, former President Trump made his first post on X since January 2021, which had been viewed over 248 million times. He posted the picture with the caption, "Election interference, never surrendered, DonaldJTrump.com." The Trump campaign had disclosed that it raised almost 20 million in the last 3 weeks after being indicted on 2 separate occasions. First, on charges stemming from the January 6, 2021 riot at the Capitol, along with the charges for allegedly attempting to interfere in the 2020 Georgia presidential election. The Biden campaign has not released how much it has raised since the post on Thursday evening. It was previously reported that Democrats had seen a massive decline in fundraising from grassroots donations. In the first half of 2023, fundraising efforts declined more than 30 million compared to the same time frame in 2020 election cycle. So we'll go ahead and end it there. But honestly, I wasn't shocked to see this. It was not too surprising to see that the people were fed up with what many are calling a unfounded political persecution of Donald Trump. Obviously, Donald Trump has a lot of haters. It's not surprising. We all can probably think of one off the top of our head, but there are so many people, whether they are in the Trump camp or not, that see this for what it is. And it's encouraging in a way to see the 7 million be fundraised after the mugshot. For me, though, I personally just enjoyed the memes. I think the memes were probably the best part to come from the mugshot. But Chris, what was your initial reaction to the article as a whole, as well as just everything going on with Trump right now?
So it's funny because I remember writing basically an article that was pretty much covering the same exact things over for Timcast, and man, it was such a whirlwind last week. I remember the Trump mugshot was going to be dropped, and I was thinking like, man, it's going to be huge, leading up until the day it was supposed to, come out. And I don't know, it's just leading up to the actual time it got leaked. I was thinking to myself like, I don't know, I don't feel good about this. Like this just kind of feels gross. Like, people are actually going to be all giddy about this when it's like the average person does not actually understand what's going on. They don't understand the ramifications of what's going on. They don't understand the precedent that it sets. And as soon as I mean, the first one, the accidental leaked one that was fake dropped, where it was a picture of him from like 2020. First of all, I saw that one and I was just like, oof, that's a bad picture. That looks horrible.
Right.
I was like, I hope this is not the real thing. And then the second one got leaked, and I don't know, like as soon as I saw the real one, and you can actually see like just the look in his face. First of all, it almost looked like the bald eagle, just the way that the glare. I don't know. It was something. As soon as I saw it, I was just like, oh, I think they screwed up. They should not have released this because this looks cool.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I felt the same way.
Yeah. It was a very weird, like instant switch of how I felt about the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I'm at too. Like, I really expected to feel sort of depressed when that mugshot finally came about, and then instead it was just like, oh man, there's there's something about Donald Trump's face in that's like he's mad. There's something about that really sort of made it fun, if that makes sense. Because the whole thing is ridiculous, obviously, and obviously it just the entire situation is horrible for our country. But I think that's where the fun part comes in, is to some degree it's like all you can do about it is laugh. And so to some degree, it's
Yeah.
like the memes that are being made are hilarious. And then just the fact that like so much of our movement immediately was like, yeah, we're just going to weaponize this and give Trump some serious fundraising. And, as a giant, as a giant screw you to the establishment. I think that's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, yeah. I wasn't, I was basically out of the, I guess, Democratic liberal matrix by 2016 when Trump originally ran. But I don't think I truly appreciated just how exactly hilarious Trump and all the memes were at the time,
Right.
because I was still just kind of taking like a very pompous know-it-all attitude to the whole thing, like, oh, how dare you talk like that if you're going to
Right.
be a presidential candidate. And I don't know, just the energy shifted online. You could tell where it was just like you said, oh, we're going to weaponize this, you guys should not have released this.
Right. Right.
The memes have been fantastic. I saw somebody put up the template of the Fulton County, just the background, and I like immediately I took a picture of myself and put it up there, and I was like, I too am guilty of questioning the 2020 election results.
You're not
It's
allowed to do
great.
that, man.
You're not allowed to do it. Well,
Yeah, that's awesome. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, you can see I posted one of my rooster as a wanted criminal from Fulton County. So, and if you know anything about Roderick, he deserves it if you've been following the show for a while. So, yeah, but man, that whole thing is just ridiculous, though. Michaela actually over on YouTube said, "Would you compare the arrest of Trump to the arrest of Nelson Mandela?" I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
um, I don't think I know enough about the Nelson Mandela and like the response to what happened. I guess on the surface, if I had to take a swing at it, I comparable. It like I don't see how it makes him look bad. There's people that hated him. They're gonna hate him no matter what. And you had people
Right.
that supported him. They're gonna support him no matter what. There was people like me. I've never been like willing to sell my soul to any political party or candidate. I mean, I got the stupid little bobblehead thing right here. It was a gift from my dad. It was funny, right? I, I've never been like it's either Trump or bust. Okay, but just watching everything that's happened over the last 8 years, and specifically what's happened in the last 6 months with the four indictments, it's like I, I don't know. Like I feel like we're going back to 2016. Stop making me defend the guy. You know?
Right. Right. Yeah, Carmen actually just jumped in the chat, said, never surrender, but he goes around surrendering. I am not laughing. I understand your take, Carmen, because, yeah, there's something to be said about. I think a lot of people were really hoping that Trump would just stay in Mar a Lago and say, okay, come get me because you don't have jurisdiction over me. And,
Yeah.
in a way, I think we are getting to the point where I don't like to think this way, but it seems like we do need to sort of force a constitutional crisis to some degree, because obviously that the stuff that they're doing is not it's very obviously politically motivated, and to some degree you kind of want to see Trump hold his ground and just say, no, I know that you're either bluffing, or if you're going to do it, you're going to be crossing yet another Rubicon, which they've crossed so many. We're getting tired of hearing that phrase even. Um, but I think ultimately, Carmen, what he probably did, I think Trump probably was trying to calculate how it could affect him politically, and I think he knew that the mugshot would honestly be a big fundraiser, which of course you can criticize him for, and I think that's fair. But I think that's probably ultimately what made him decide to go to Fulton County. And I think part of Trump, and this is maybe a weakness of his as well, is I think he's aware of what he is constantly accused of being. The harsh dictator that he's always he's always told that he is. And I think to some degree that makes him a little bit too compliant sometimes. I think that's a lot of what we saw in 2020, which is my biggest complaint with him. And if Gavin does manage to join the stream tonight, I'll definitely pick his brain on some of that stuff. And of course, Chris, you're welcome to chime in on some of that too, because I do think that is the biggest frustration that I have right now. And Chris, just so you're aware of kind of our audience, I've put out a few polls. Our audience is pretty 50-50 on Trump and DeSantis, we've got a pretty split audience, which is demographically based on what we're seeing in so many polls, pretty unique for our audience. Um, and I'm pretty agnostic on the primary. I honestly see arguments for Trump. I see them for DeSantis. I even see them for Vivek. And I know Vivek has a lot of, mystery about him. That's, again, the biggest thing that makes me hesitant towards him. But I think he's saying a lot of great things. So I'm still very undecided, and I'm honestly just letting this primary play out because for me, there's a lot of questions that need answered still. But I mean, what's your thoughts on Trump and surrendering to Fulton County?
So I can see why. I don't know. I guess both sides make sense. Because on the one hand, you're putting your foot down, you're making them play their cards. But it's also crossing a Rubicon on when I say our side, I'm saying, like anti-establishment, anybody who's just against the mainstream narrative, that I think would be us crossing a Rubicon. Do you know what I mean? Because if our side is like the side of true law and order, and I think that would be us crossing a Rubicon where I don't know if the benefits outweigh the risks. It'd still be badass. Like, it'd be super punk rock if he did that. But I respect for it. Like, I'm not mad. But at the same time, I think kind of like what you said, Trump's really aware of what he's being accused of. And I think a lot of that plays into how he chooses to play his own hand. Where, I mean, he hadn't been on Twitter in 2.5, going on 3 years in January. And what's the first thing that happens that after the mugshot comes out? He tweets that. It's like, I think whether it's Trump himself or the people he's surrounding himself with right now in the campaign, I think that they are doing the calculations and they're weighing costs and benefits, and so I don't know. I'm not going to be the type of person that's going to say whatever they do is the right move. I'm going to sit back and watch, and so far it seems like it might have played in his favor.
Yeah, at least it sure did when it comes to the fundraising. That's for sure.
Oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
this is kind of on the opposite spectrum in a way, this story here. So this is actually from the Daily Wire. Efforts to remove Trump from 2024 ballot using 14th Amendment ramp up. Efforts to remove former President Donald Trump from state ballots in the 2024 election are ramping up nationwide after critics argued the leading Republican contender is constitutionally disqualified from serving as president after he engaged in insurrection against the United States. Trump, who is leading the GOP primaries by a landslide, faces 4 separate indictments along the East Coast, including charges related to hush money, classified documents, election interference, and racketeering. Trump has broadly denied any wrongdoing in the charges brought against him and has claimed politically motivated forces are targeting him in a witch hunt propagated by the Biden administration and Democrat prosecutors. But now opponents across the political spectrum of the former president are arguing that under the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment, Trump is barred from holding office ever again after the January 6th Capitol attack. Lawrence Kaplan, a Florida tax attorney, became the first to challenge Trump's candidacy for president in federal court last week, pointing to the amendment's disqualification clause that says those who have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the government cannot hold office. He told The Hill that the former president's grand jury indictments in Washington, D.C., election interference federal case, and the Georgia case stemming from alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election make his disqualification automatic, despite neither indictment accusing Trump of inciting the mob that attacked the Capitol. Quote, the bottom line here is that President Trump both engaged in an insurrection and also gave aid and comfort to other individuals who are engaging in such actions within the clear meaning of those terms as defined in Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, end quote. Kaplan wrote in a filing last week challenging Trump's eligibility to run for office again. Quote, assuming that the public record to date is accurate and we have no evidence to the contrary, Trump is no longer eligible to seek the office of the President of the United States or of any other state of the Union, end quote. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified in 1868 in the aftermath of the Civil War during the Reconstruction era and was designed to represent a new birth of freedom for previously disenfranchised citizens, according to Cornell University's Legal Information Institute. The amendment's disqualification clause was written to bar those who had joined the Confederacy from serving in the state or federal office, but would theoretically still apply to those who engage in future rebellions or insurrections against the U.S. I'm going to go ahead and stop it there because the article goes on for a while, but I think it's really interesting to see that so many individuals now on both political parties are calling for Trump to be removed from the ballot. It's not surprising because obviously we know of individuals within the Republican Party that are very much never Trumpers, and some of them, can say that they have personally been scorned by Donald Trump. Others just hate him because they just don't like how he talks or they don't like his policies or whatever the case may be. But either way, this is sort of where, to Carmen's point earlier about Trump surrendering, ultimately it's very clear that they're going to paint him as a criminal and try to get him removed. And I think one of the biggest things that the Trump camp, both his supporters and his campaign, really need to answer is what's going to be their answer to these efforts to have him removed. So, Chris, I think I lost you there. We'll wait for you to come back in. But either way, those of you watching, to my point, that really is the big question that so many are not answering. They're not saying whether or not the Trump campaign has a backup plan for handling him being removed from the ballot altogether. And many of his supporters are not answering that question as well. There's maybe a select few that are starting to game plan. But Chris, what was your initial reaction to the article now that we have you back?
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't think my internet was just going to cut out like that. I don't mean to, I guess, quote my boss, but I think he has a point. Civil War. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to just say what he's saying, right? He doesn't tell us anything to say. Before I even knew who Tim was back in 2015, 2016, when that whole shit went down, I remember thinking in the back of my mind, watching the response, I couldn't articulate what I was seeing, but all I knew in the back of my head was like, oh shoot, are we actually moving towards some kind of like a conflict? This is it's not good. But I mean, I find it ironic that it's happening in Florida of all places, where they had such a heavy conservative turnout in the last 2022 midterm election. Why aren't they trying to remove him in California? Why aren't they trying to remove him in New York? Why is it Florida?
Yeah. I think there is an effort in California as well, but I think Florida is the one that's gotten the most progress towards actually making it happen.
Right. And look at the language that they keep using. Insurrection.
Mm-hmm.
Why do they keep using that term? Is it because that's the only term that I guess they could have some legs for whatever, they're trying to pass to get them off the ballot? I mean, I remember when January 6th happened, all I thought was like, oh, that's crazy. It looks like a riot. Wow.
Right.
And then I was looking at what Trump's saying. I'm looking at what he's tweeting. And I was like, oh man, that's crazy. And then the reaction to it was just so out of proportion to what I was watching. It was bad, don't get me wrong.
Oh, for sure.
But the reaction of this whole insurrection was like, what? Did we watch the same exact thing happen? Because I remember, I'm thinking back to like, how many times have I seen all these abortion activists storm their state capitol? And
right.
We didn't call that insurrection. I mean, so, and then the even funnier thing was to watch the fall of Kabul that same year in August.
Yeah.
And just the imagery coming out of people in their, I guess, whatever state capitol building you would call that, holding guns. And it's just like, okay, yeah, that was an insurrection. And you
Right.
take what happened on January 6th. I'm like, wait, so they didn't have guns and nobody, the only person that actually died was a Trump supporter? I mean, you're overplaying your hand. Okay, this was not insurrection. But they have to keep the narrative going because that's the only thing that's going to actually hold any weight if they try to go forward with removing him from the ballot. If they remove him from the ballot, again, it's a Rubicon. Where do you go after that? I don't know, and that's one of the things that does terrify me is if he becomes the nominee. I guess what's the precedent for that? If it's one thing, I guess if California removes him from the ballot, we already know California is going to go blue no matter
For
what.
sure.
Um, so the fact that it's happening in Florida is, I have to assume that people know what they're doing. On the same token, though, I still think that it's completely a violation of just anybody who's willing to vote for a man who is duly elected in their primary, even for California, to remove him from the ballot. Because you are telling your own constituents, you are telling citizens they cannot vote for somebody who they voted for, who they
Right.
have selected to be their nominee. That's really dangerous territory, and I'm terrified to see what happens.
Yeah. And unfortunately, you're right. There's no good place to go from there. I mean, what do you do? The only way that I see ending this, and I really hope I'm wrong. I hope that there's a better solution. But I immediately think the only way that it's going to work is if other people on the left hand of the aisle start getting um, indicted as well. By a Republican attorney general or something to the effect, Republican DA. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen because it seems like Republicans just need to sit on their hands all the time. Apparently, that's a job requirement. But I mean, the only way I see this slowing down is if mutual destruction is assured. And when one side is able to do whatever they want and get away with it, they're just going to keep doing it. And it's hard. You don't want to get to this point where we're just doing tit for tat. But at the same time, right now, it's just one side is throwing punches while the other side's just sitting there with their hands behind their back, getting punched in the face. And at some point, there needs to be some self defense. And unfortunately, I don't know when we're going to see it. Devon said indictments are not evidence over on YouTube, and exactly. Unfortunately, they don't care, and that's where, like Chris said, it's getting dangerous. I don't know where we go from here. I'm hoping that things can sort of calm down and the temperature can drop a bit. But I mean, the reality is, regardless of who becomes the nominee, it's not just Trump that they have this hatred towards. I mean, if the nominee ends up being DeSantis, or if it ends up being Vivek or anyone else, the reality is it's going to be the exact same type of targeting uh, towards whoever's the next front runner. And the only way that a front runner won't be targeted is if they're a part of that establishment. To be honest, I'd be more concerned if someone got in and wasn't being targeted the same way Trump was. That'd be almost more concerning at this point because it's very obvious that Trump makes the joke of um, they're not after me, they're after you. I'm just in the way. And you know, as great of a canned line as that has become, there is still truth to that. The reality is, we see them going after the alternate electorates in Michigan. We see the way that people who are there on January 6th are being treated. I mean, the reality is they are after just anyone who is to the right of Bernie Sanders, and unfortunately, that's not going to stop anytime soon unless something changes. And I'm hoping that it's going to be a peaceful solution because I don't know where we go from here.
I don't know if there can be a peaceful solution. Um, I want there to be, but in the same respect, like when you're talking about constitutional convention of states and some kind of a separation, it's there's going to be conflict. It's inevitable,
Yeah.
and the chances of that conflict becoming some kind of you know whether that's open, what's the word I'm looking for? Kinetic warfare. I don't know. Whether that's cutting off supply chains, I don't know. But I mean, something's going to happen. There's going to be some kind of a conflict. It's not going to be just a quick, easy thing, if that was to even happen in the first place. I thought the same exact thing back during 2020, where I was, it seems like the only way out of it is through some kind of conflict. How do you get back to a place where you have your individual freedom back without fighting for it in whatever way that means? And that's because I don't want anybody to clip this. That's not me saying, be violent. That's not me saying anything. I'm just saying, like, there is no way out of this except out. You know what I mean?
Right. No way out but through. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. Yeah, because lost my train of thought there. I had something a moment ago. It'll come to me. But yeah, I mean, you're right. The reality is we don't have any real solutions, unless something changes. And I fear that any of the sort of people waiting in the wings behind Trump, I don't know if they're going to cut it, but we'll see. And our next story is going to talk just a bit about that. This is from FoxNews.com. Desantis, Ramaswamy experience fundraising surge after first Republican debate. Both campaigns announced they raised more than $1 million in the 24 hours following the contest. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy experienced an impressive fundraising surge following the first Republican debate. DeSantis' campaign confirmed to Fox News Digital that it pulled in more than $1 million in the 24 hours after Wednesday's contest in Milwaukee. Ron DeSantis showed Wednesday night that he is a proven leader who will deliver results as president, and we are thrilled with the flood of support we have received since his debate victory, DeSantis campaign manager James Utmeyer told Fox News Digital. We look forward to building on this momentum in the weeks and months ahead as the governor continues to outwork everyone in this race as he lays out his vision to reverse our nation's decline and revive the American dream. Political newcomer Ramaswamy also saw money flow into his committee. His campaign hauled in $460,000 on debate night and $600,000 on Thursday, bringing his total to over $1 million in new funds over 24 hours, the New York Post reported. Ramaswamy's cash wave was much needed as his campaign reported raising $19 million through the year's first half. Ramaswamy, however, had loaned his committee more than $15 million of that amount. So I am glad to see, in a way, that that the sort of number 2 and number 3 candidate in this race are becoming well-funded. In a way, that is a good sign. It's a good sign to see that there's at least some momentum behind who may become our sort of backup choices. And by our, I mean, of course, the movement. I'm not committing to voting for any particular person, as I've said before, at least not at this time. I'll let you know if that changes. But I do know that our movement so far, based on averages of polls, and of course, you could take all polls of a heaping pound of salt at this point, excuse me. But either way, the polls are supposedly showing that Donald Trump is significantly up. So regardless, it's nice to see that the number 2 and 3 candidate are in fact raising money and building up their war chest. But the debate was definitely something that was a bit unfortunate to me. I really thought DeSantis could have done a whole lot better. That was a pretty big flop on my behalf. I had really high expectations for him, and to some degree, it could just be that I had too high of expectations for DeSantis. But ultimately, I just don't think he looked very good in the debate. And I know that a lot of people in our audience are not going to be very happy with me saying that, because we have a lot of DeSantis supporters here, and I want you guys to know that I love DeSantis. I thought he was an amazing governor. I'm not saying any of this to bash him. I'm saying this because the reality is he's just not connecting in a way that he needs to win this race. I think at best he didn't look bad in the debates. I would say at one point with the whole hand raise thing, when he was asked if he would support Trump if he was indicted, and Ron DeSantis caught on camera was looking left and right to see who was raising their hand before he kind of timidly raised his hand. That did look bad. Okay, I will say that. But aside from that moment, he didn't look bad overall as a whole compared to so many of the other candidates who made fools of themselves, like Chris Christie. But ultimately, that's not enough to win the nomination. I mean, the reality is you got to be risky right now if you have any hopes of beating someone like Trump, who has the loyalty from a large portion of the base. There are some people that will vote for Trump no matter what he does. The reality is, if you want to win against Trump, you have to be bold. You have to paint with really bold colors. And unfortunately, Ron DeSantis was kind of forgotten on the debate stage, despite him being in the middle of the stage. But yeah, I mean, Chris, tell me more of your thoughts about both the article, the fundraising, as well as your overall take on the debate.
So the fundraising is awesome. I remember when Vivek got in the race, and I remember he was just this guy that I had seen on MSNBC or something here and there on whatever show it is, and I remember hearing him. I'm like, oh, this guy sounds like he's pretty smart. Sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
Right.
Didn't know anything about him, and then he jumps in the race, and I'm like, all right, cool, and whatever. Seems like he's a reasonable guy, and I don't know. I've seen like people just dogpile on the dude. The more he starts to get more prominent in the polls and just in the reception of the debates, I don't understand it at all. On the one hand, I hear people say that he's been like this almost Obama figure, that he comes out of nowhere. He's young, fresh blood. He says the right things. He's got the look to him, and I understand those concerns. Also, at the same time, I don't know if he is the Obama, but of the right. Well, isn't that a good thing for us? Because Obama got a lot of things done for the left. So wouldn't that make us want him? But I think the competition is good. I think DeSantis has been overhyped. I think he's been great for Florida. And don't get me wrong, like, look, kind of like you, if DeSantis is the nominee, like, I'm gonna go for him. Like I have more complaints about his campaign than him as a politician.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just been like that. The raise your hand part. I know it's a stupid thing to say, "Oh, raise your hand," but the optics for
Exactly.
just the average person watching were really bad. Just the way. My problems with his campaign has been his leadership behind the scenes, because there's clearly been people working behind the scenes that he should have let go of that are still working for him, that are, in my opinion, taking his campaign down. And just to see, if you're not letting them go, what's to stop you from not letting anybody else go in office as president? But yeah, just the raise your hand part, and to see him kind of look around before he raises his hand, it's just a bad look. It's just a bad look. The average voter is
what
looking
you
at
said
that.
about the campaign, like about,
Yeah.
It seems like he has some bad people around him for his campaign, because the reality is, I mean, think like, so if you're a DeSantis supporter, because again, I know a lot of my audience is, again, this is me just trying to be objective, not necessarily trying to attack him or anything like that. It's just trying to be constructive with my criticism. DeSantis got well known because he obviously had good legislation, which to some degree, you have to give credit to the Florida legislator as well. I'm not saying that means DeSantis doesn't get credit. He obviously does. But a lot of what made him so good is that you would see him on, on a press conference, getting asked just a dumb question by a liberal reporter, and he would just absolutely destroy them. He wouldn't take their spin, and he would just send it back to them tenfold and make them look ridiculous. He's not doing that in his campaign. In his campaign, he's been very quiet. I have talked to Todd Erzin, is a guy that endorsed him really early, and he's been on the show before. And I was asking Todd, why is he not doing conservative adversarial media hits? I actually specifically asked Todd, why is he not going on Charlie Kirk? Why is he not going on Candace Owens? Why is he not going on Tim Cast? Because all three of those prominent platforms have mentioned that they've reached out to DeSantis and have either been ghosted or told no. And that's a big problem because he's in the primary. Right now, he should be courting everyone to the right of center who might potentially vote for him in this primary if he wants to win. And to be fair, Todd gave a decent answer. He said that he's focusing on Iowa because Iowa is the first, the first state, and the Iowa caucus is important. And I think if he can win there, he will get momentum to carry him through. But to some degree, it's not the best answer. I understand the answer, but does he not have 5 minutes here and there to jump on these shows? I mean, you could do them long distance and maybe not Timcast, but of course, Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens. I mean, you can do exactly what Chris and I are doing here. So it is concerning to me because it feels like he's being protected from being asked questions from the Trump camp. And to be honest, I think he can handle those questions very well because we saw him handle bad questions. And that's all I'm saying. The Slayer from Florida is not what's being shown to the people anymore. And that's what made him so likable in the midst of the lockdowns. Is he was the main guy that was standing up because Trump was no longer in office. He was our main fighter that was pushing back. And I do think that he is the number one individual who is responsible for lockdowns not lasting any longer than they did. So I'm giving him huge credit by saying that. But that's not translating into his campaign. So it seems like he needs to fire some people in his campaign. And the fact that he hasn't makes me question, okay, he hits Trump for not firing Fauci, but it seems like he's got people around him that are hurting his campaign right now that he's not firing. So how do we know that he wouldn't do the same in the presidency? That's just a question that needs to be answered. And I've got some very pro DeSantis commentators that will come on in the near future, I'm sure, and maybe they can answer that for me. But right now, I don't see the answer being presented. So, of course, feel free to disagree with me in the chat and in the comments. I'm always open to it. And truly, I just want to see DeSantis do a good job because I don't care if it's Trump. I don't care if it's DeSantis. I don't care if it's Vivek. I just want the very best candidate possible so that we can win in 24, because I think 2024, if you've seen some of my episodes previously, 2024, it's going to be a long shot if we win in the first place. I honestly think we're already the underdogs, and people aren't willing to accept that. But they're still focused on, talking about arguing our ideas, which is good to a point, but we also need to get some ground game going, and that needs to happen quickly.
Yeah. And I kind of want to reiterate, I have no bad feelings towards DeSantis as a candidate or as a person. I mean, I was born and raised in California. As soon as all the COVID lockdown stuff happened, we were one of the worst states, us, New York.
Right.
I was envious of Florida and him reopening up and just letting people take their own risks. I was envious because we went through a year and a half, 2 years straight of just, the masks. I think at one point we took them off for about a month and then it was right back on. And I was so done with it. So just to see people in Florida being able to live their lives, even throughout the whole whatever was going on with the pandemic, I was jealous, and so I hope that, if he won the presidency, he would, maybe replicate what he was doing in Florida. Obviously, you'd have to have a favorable Congress too, but I don't know. I think it's been a combination of that, and people are sick of COVID. I forget who said it to me the other day, but they were pointing out that regardless of what DeSantis's policies on COVID were, people are so done with COVID, they don't even want to hear it get brought up. When he starts to say like, "Oh, well, Trump didn't fire Fauci." I agree. Trump, he assisted in some of these lockdowns by letting Fauci. I agree. Also, yeah, I think people are just done with COVID and they don't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah.
But on top of that, like back to the debate thing, the optics. Average voters are looking at that dumb little hand raise and they're seeing a lot. Like if an image is worth 1,000 words, that right there was worth 1,000 books. Okay. And it was that, and it was the Ukraine question too. That one's the one that really got to me.
Yeah,
I'm
that
I'm a
bothered me too.
child of 9/11. I'm a child of 9/11.
Right.
I'm going to be 31 this year. I remember when that whole thing happened, and all of a sudden we're worried like, oh, is are we going to have war in the United States? Are we going to fight the war here? And we were scared. And then the war happens for 20 years, and
Right.
then the way that it ends with Kabul is just like, I don't know, man. That was ridiculous. Now to see it
Right.
all happening with Ukraine, it's like, I don't want this for my country again, dude. That was my whole life,
Right.
from the time I was 10. And just to see Vivek was the only one to just raise his hand right away. And then Desantis give that half-hearted, oh, well, Europe needs to pull their weight. And then the other 6 candidates just left their hands down like they're just admitting they're war hawks.
Right. They really are, and that's
Yeah.
unfortunate. And someone's probably going to say we're being unfair in that regard because they're going to say he raised his hand and he's not going to support Ukraine. But his messaging on Ukraine has been very confusing, and that's again what I'm talking about here. If he's wanting to win, he needs to be a lot more clear on Ukraine because he has flip flopped a little bit. Some people think he's been crystal clear. I don't see that, honestly. I just don't. I think that you're being a little generous to him if you think he's been crystal clear on Ukraine. He called it a territorial dispute. Then he talked about how Putin is, I think he called him a war criminal. I don't remember for sure if he did. I could be corrected on that. But either way, he started getting really aggressive towards Putin. And it's kind of like, well, which one is it? Are you gonna, to some degree, like I'm just down for Trump's answer. This is the thing that Trump is honestly best at. I think Trump is honestly weakest on his domestic policy. His foreign policy, though, when he was on CNN, has just said, I don't want people dying. Like that is the answer that I want out of the Ukraine question. I understand that there are people that we have responsibilities to across the globe, but Ukraine is just not one of them, and that's a big concern to me. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, let's move on here. I actually wanted to bring up. Oh, let me go ahead and get this pulled up here. I actually did not have it ready to go, but there is another story I wanted to get to with Larry Elder. Did you see much of what was happening with him, Chris?
Yeah, I actually met him when he was down at the studio about a month ago or so. Super nice dude. I voted for him in the Newsom recall in 2021. That was just a shame. That whole election night, it was really disheartening just to see, like, man, my state really is just done for.
Yeah, that was really hard. And those of you who don't know what we're talking about in terms of what's happening with Larry Elder currently, Larry Elder is running for president, and he was kept from the debate stage with the RNC. And so I'm going to go ahead and let Larry kind of recap his situation on his own, in his own words. Sorry, I was looking at the chat here, but we'll go ahead and just let Larry do the talking.
Supporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is 2024 presidential contender Larry Elder. Larry, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Brittany, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course, you were not on the debate stage last night. The debate did happen, but you said earlier this week you plan to sue the RNC and file an FEC complaint against them after they said you didn't meet the qualifications to be on stage. Break down that action for us a little bit.
So, Brittany, you notice I wasn't on the stage last night. I met all the criteria, 40,000 individual donations, 200 had come from 20 different states. We exceeded that. The problem is I needed to file 3 polls where I was at least at 1%. We did. After I did it, I get a phone call from Ronna McDaniel and the debate star, David Bossie. I'm sorry, Larry, one of the polls you submitted, we can't use. I said, why? And they said it's the Rasmussen poll. It is, quote, affiliated with the Donald Trump campaign, close quote. And I said, assuming that is true, what does it have to do with me? And they said, well, any campaign that's affiliated with a poll, that poll we can't use. I said, the same poll, Rasmussen, that you guys quote all the time, the same poll, Rasmussen, that was the most accurate one in 2016, you can't use it? They said yes. A few hours later, Brittany, on Twitter, Rasmussen puts a tweet and says, Trump had nothing to do with our poll, did not authorize it, did not commission it, did not even recommend it, and there's no reason why Larry Elder cannot use our poll as one of the official polls necessary for him to meet his criteria. Also, after we found out that they were not going to use Rasmussen, we submitted another poll that had me above 1%, but they said, well, you submitted that one too late. We wouldn't have submitted it late had we known you were going to disqualify one of the polls that we put up there. My lawyer is the former chair of the Federal Election Commission, and he says the FEC sets forth the rules for debate, and once you set forth your criteria, you have to apply that criteria objectively to every single person. His argument is failing to do that made the RNC essentially give an in-kind contribution to the 8 people who made it, and furthermore, makes Fox News also essentially giving an in-kind contribution to these 8 people, so that our lawyer argues that this could subject them to a fine of $100 million to the RNC and to Fox News. And we threatened if I was not on that stage by 2 o'clock yesterday, we were going to drop the complaint. The complaint now going to be filed at 2 o'clock local time. I thought cooler heads were going to prevail. I assume that because Fox News, for example, is a publicly held corporation and they have a fiduciary obligation to avoid any unnecessary expense, I thought they put pressure on the RNC if the RNC didn't see the light of day on their own to put me up there, but they did not. So now we're going forth with this complaint, which we're filing, as I said, at 2 o'clock local time. And I'm still in Milwaukee right now. Not only was I barred from the debate, I was barred from the debate venue. They posted a notice and told security if Elder or Elder's campaign showed up, don't let them in. So what am I now, a terrorist?
There we have it. Larry Elder in his own words. So I was really frustrated to see this because, like I've mentioned, I'm pretty agnostic on this primary, but to be honest, I would be more than happy to have some more options. And Larry Elder has a record as a commentator and just as someone who fights for liberty, as a long-standing figure in the sort of liberty movement. He ran for governor of California, as Chris already alluded to, and he unfortunately lost that recall election against Gavin Newsom, which to some degree is, I mean, that was a hard undertaking to try to flip California red, that's for sure. But either way, Larry Elder probably would have given some amazing answers. And this is one of those moments where Larry Elder being on the stage had an opportunity to really raise himself up in the polling. I think he would have performed really well. The man is like an encyclopedia when it comes to debates. I think he would have done an amazing job. He probably would have been just as enthusiastic about saying no to Ukraine funding as Vivek. He probably would have been just as enthusiastic about raising his hand about if Donald Trump was indicted, whether or not you'd support him. So I think that he would answer the questions that I think Ron DeSantis looked weakest on. I think he'd answer them very strongly. I truly think that Larry Elder not being there was a massive disservice to his campaign. I'm glad to see that he's pursuing legal action as a result. But Chris, what was your initial reaction to the Larry Elder situation?
I think it's insulting to voters. I think it's insulting to anybody who donated to his campaign. He met the requirements. I don't know if you're familiar with what was going on in California during the recall election or not, because obviously that was happening over there and it's not on the national stage. But there was, shenanigans that was going on.
Absolutely.
When he was just trying to file his paperwork to run for governor in the first place.
Yep.
I don't remember exactly what was going on, but it had something to do with I think they weren't processing the paperwork on time, or they said he submitted it late or something to that effect. And it was one of those things where it was just like, you're lying. Okay. Like, you clearly just don't want this guy on the ballot. And I have to wonder, like, he's basically got all of the statesman, like, just, straight-laced kind of dude. He's very conversational, but he's got all the things that Trump, I guess you could say he doesn't have, but he's got all like the same stances. So it's just very weird why people are so against this dude. And it just keeps coming back around, and specifically in California, where you had all the race politics and the woke this, woke that. And my God, like, you smeared the black dude. It makes no sense.
The black face of white supremacy, Larry Elder.
Oh, that was ridiculous, man. Yeah. It's
really
weird why people are so afraid of this guy.
Yeah, it really does seem like there's something about Larry Elder that the establishment fears. I don't know what it is. I mean, obviously, I think Larry Elder is very constitutional. I think Larry Elder is very sharp. I think he'd make a lot of individuals look really bad if he was to be on stage with them. And I think that's a lot of why they don't want him up there. I think they don't want to sort of make a deeper bench of the more, I hate to say Trump wing, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. America First wing of the party. Individuals who, I would say DeSantis is closer to being on that side of the wing than the establishment side. I don't think he's in the establishment. I think he's got some establishment figures maybe advising him poorly, but I don't think he is establishment himself. And then Vivek, of course, is really trying to put himself in that category too. Larry Elder could have been too. I mean, like Chris mentioned, the whole stage, it really showed that they were full of war hawks. And it would have been nice to have another candidate who would not have been in that same category. And I think Larry Elder, because he's polling only around 1% right now, I think he only would have gone up from being at that debate, because I think Larry Elder would have performed incredibly. And I really hope that he's able to really get back at the RNC for this, because I think that they really hosed him out of an opportunity to make the very next debate. In fact, I think that's another thing that I saw. He's trying to get to the very next debate at the Reagan Library, and it post similar requirements. I think he has to do like 50,000 donors or something to that effect. And he was saying in an interview, it sure would have been nice if I would have been on the first debate stage that I qualified for, so that I could easily qualify for this next debate too. And I think that's ultimately what they want to do. I don't think that they want Larry Elder on that stage, and they're doing what they can to make sure that he can't. And yet Doug Burgum and Asa Hutchinson, they're both on the stage. And I don't remember which one it was. I think it might have been Doug, but he was saying that if you donate to his campaign, you get like a $20 gift card or something ridiculous like that. I mean, feel free to fact check me on that, but I think it was Doug.
Yeah.
And it's like ridiculous. So I mean, I actually know individuals that are supporting Trump that donated just to get that $20 gift card. So it's like Doug Burgum's there by doing things that really, I don't know if they're illegal or if they're against RNC rules, but they definitely aren't honest, I would say, whether they're legal or not. And it's unfortunate to see Larry Elder not get a place up on that stage, because I think he really deserves to be there much more than both of those two, if not everyone on that stage, minus maybe Ron DeSantis, Pence, and Vivek, just by qualification standpoint. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but I always thought Larry Elder would make a great press secretary. I think he would do so amazing in that role, and maybe we'll see some form of cabinet position for him or something in the whoever's administration it ends up being, if assuming we can even flip the White House in 2024. Yeah,
and it's funny because back in California, before he had even announced that he was going to seek governorship, I mean, he had people asking him for a long time, you should run for governor, you should seek office, and he was no, it's not for me. And then when he finally ran for governor, it was just like, I don't know, it just made sense. And then to see him run for president, even if he doesn't get it, kind of like what you're saying, I think now at this point, he's probably open to being some kind of press secretary or holding some kind of cabinet position. I think he's fantastic, just a monstrous debater. I was honestly, back in the day, I was watching Larry Elder and Dave Rubin, their little debate that they had in 2015 or so. That was one of the pivotal moments where I started opening up and like realizing, I might be wrong about a lot of this stuff. It's just a shame that, even if he's not going to be the nominee, even if he's not going to be chosen as a vice president or any member of a cabinet, just getting on the stage and just getting those ideas out there, that helps drive the narrative of what this primary season and what, the Republican Party's stance is going to be in the upcoming election. So, and it's just a shame because we could have had the opportunity to get on the right path.
Yeah, I agree. And Larry Elder definitely woke up a lot of people with that Dave Rubin interview. He woke up Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin's much more probably libertarian, conservative-ish about some things, at least. Maybe economically conservative, that's for sure. But many people were woken up by that interview, and many people owe Larry Elder a big thank you for snapping them out of the matrix, as it's so often labeled. But awesome. Well, Chris, I really appreciate you joining the show. I want to go ahead and turn it over to you to let the audience know where they can find you to keep up with everything that you're doing and everything you have coming down the pipeline.
Of course. Go to timcast.com, click the read tab. You can find articles from me, all the other writers, Hannah Claire. She's tremendous colleague, Adrian Norman, Chris Carr, Cassandra McDonald. We got a great team. And then you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Man of Bert. I like to yell at people. It's fun. It's just dunking on people, man. It's great.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here and putting up with my antics, as Michael's not here to calm me down, walk me off the edge. But either way, it was a lot of fun. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening wherever you consume this content. We really appreciate it. Join us sometime if you are listening on one of our podcast platforms. Join us for Monday Night Live on YouTube or Rumble sometime if you want to be in the chats and be part of the conversation. But we'll go ahead and see you next time. Thanks again.